Greetings to everyone. Welcome to Datagaps webinar. I am Pooja Gupta, Growth Marketing Manager with Datagaps, and I would like to thank you all for joining us today. Before we get started, we have a couple of quick housekeeping comments. First, we have muted all mics to avoid unintended distractions. Next, the chat room is open so that you can interact with us through the chat. And finally, at the end of the session, we'll open it up for Q&A. Today in this webinar, we will share how Datagaps DataOps suite supports Tableau to Power BI migration with features like cross-platform regression testing, functional testing, performance testing, and stress testing. On the panel today, we have David Small, VP of Sales at Datagaps, and Shubhanshu Dikshit, Product Manager at Datagaps. And here is our agenda for today's webinar. First, we'll have a quick overview of Datagaps and DataOps suites and how Datagaps DataOps suite assist with data validation for Tableau to Power BI migration projects. Next, we will discuss about how DataOps suite scales up the migration validation process for hundreds of reports with a single drop-down. Second, how DataOps suite supports data reconciliation to ensure data consistency between Power BI and Tableau platforms. Post that, we will share functional testing of Power BI platform along with wizard-based test creation. And in the end, we will share real-world case studies and success stories exhibiting the transformative impact of BI platform migration testing automation. Now, we have also included a couple of polls which will pop up in between the complete webinar multiple times. And we would request every attendee to share their feedback by answering them with a single click. Now I hand this over to Dave. Dave, stage is all yours.
All right. Thank you, Pooja. Really, what I wanted to do is just talk about, the genesis of why are we doing this Tableau to Power BI migration testing webinar. And some of the reason is that we had an influx of a lot of people talking about wanting to migrate, and a lot of it was about I want to migrate from Tableau to Power BI. I want to make sure that everybody is aware that we are data analytics or business intelligence agnostic. We're not suggesting that you ought to move from one to the other or vice versa, but a good discussion about consolidation of your BI platforms has a lot of advantages. I've been in this business for many years, and I've seen companies that they indicate they have 20 or 23 different business intelligence platforms, and they were trying to consolidate down to a few. I can't even name 23. I can't name 23 business intelligence platforms, but there is some real value in looking at your landscape and figuring out, can I bring that landscape down to a couple or two or three platforms? And there's some real advantages to doing that. So why consolidate your business intelligence platforms? Well, certainly there's some cost savings from the point of view of the amount of time that it takes you to do the implementations, the amount of time it takes to actually create dashboards and reports, the training costs, and a variety of other things. Not to mention, there is a big discrepancy between BI platforms in terms of how they price. And so, there's some real value in taking a look at that and seeing if you can gain some value in that. I'm not going to go through all of these, but the next one I wanted to talk about is really simplifying IT management. So IT management, for every business intelligence platform, data analytics platform, or other types of applications, having to manage multiple systems means additional training, additional hardware, additional support, additional problem shooting, and so on. And by consolidating down to one or two or three different business intelligence platforms, that really does help management and simplifies things. It also will improve collaboration. So a single BI platform really fosters that collaboration between groups. you're talking the same language. And also it helps eliminate to some degree the multiple versions of the truth. So again, for each organization, there are some reasons, and depending upon how many platforms you have, the complexity of the platforms, and so on, it really is a good idea to periodically look at and evaluate, are you getting the value that you need out of all of the platforms, or could you do some things to improve collaboration and so forth by consolidating to a few platforms? Now, some of the considerations when moving and consolidating to a few platforms or even one platform is certainly the data compatibility issues. Is the data compatible? What am I going to have to do in order to restructure my data pipelines? A variety of things along those lines. Am I doing this in conjunction with moving to the cloud, as an example? Or is something like Microsoft Fabric driving the need to move from a particular data analytics platform to Power BI and Microsoft Fabric? Now, another consideration is the sheer number of dashboards and reports, and how much of them are duplicated, how much of them are duplicated, how much of them are used. This is a long time ago, but we used to joke in data analytics that what we ought to do is turn off the reports for a month and see who complains, and therefore those are the ones that are being used. Certainly that's not the proper approach, a little archaic, but you get the point, right? You probably have duplications in one platform, and you probably have duplications across platforms. So that's another consideration. And then trying to consolidate down to one or two platforms, the features and functionality that each of them have, can I migrate, say, Tableau to Power BI and get the same kind of capabilities? Or are the visuals going to be dramatically different? Or are there things that I can't do in Power BI that I could do in Tableau? Nowadays, it seems to me that the data analytics platforms are so sophisticated and have so much capability that I really don't think there's a whole lot of deltas between what they do. It's probably more on how they do it. And then integration. What am I going to have to do in order to take what my ecosystem was for, in this case, Tableau, and integrate it within a different platform, different data sources, or a different environment like the cloud? And then finally, another consideration is scalability. Is my new platform going to perform better? Is it going to perform worse? Is it going to look the same? Is it going to be easy enough to use? So there's a ton of considerations that one should consider when looking at and thinking about doing that consolidation. One of them that we strongly believe in, because we are a data testing company. We test the data pipeline from the point of ingestion all the way through to consumption in the data analytics platform. And in our case, we also can test the differences between the Tableau reports and dashboards and data and Power BI. So we believe that testing is a huge consideration. And the lack of testing really means that you have a high probability of failure. Automated testing gives you that ability to make sure that things are migrated properly, that you're getting the same results, and so on. So that's what this is about, is testing of this migration project. Here's some examples, a couple of examples of how we function in BI Validator and DataOps suite. So if you're looking at testing, what we do is we have components that you drag and drop onto a palette. One of the components is Tableau, and what that does is it connects into your Tableau environment and has access based upon security and passwords to the workbooks and so on that Tableau has. Another one is a Power BI component where you drag that onto the palette, and it gives you access to all of the Power BI procedures that you have security and permissions to access. So when you do that, there's a lot of different types of tests that you can create, because now you have access to the data that's being rendered, the reports, the dashboards, filters, a wide variety of things. And in this particular case, what we're doing is we're comparing Tableau to Power BI at a data level, and we're doing that at multiple data levels in that process. So you can also do test Power BI to Tableau reports visually. So we will actually take a snapshot of the Tableau report, a snapshot of the Power BI report, and we'll do a comparison. We're adding some additional capability. So, right now it's pretty easy to see and eyeball that, yeah, there's some differences, right? I have pie charts and bar charts and a heat map and so on. But if you have hundreds or thousands of those, then, that really becomes a much bigger issue. But we're also adding some capability to be able to use Gen AI, where Gen AI will take and tell us the differences between these and summarize that, so you don't have to go in and visually look or look at the test cases that we've run. That can be part of it, and that information can be sent to you directly. We also do the data comparisons between Power BI and Tableau at a data level. So every one of these charts and every one of these metrics on this particular dashboard, those are rendered by a data set that has been formulated by Tableau or Power BI. Happens in both technologies. So, we have about 7, I think it is, different metrics and dashboards and such here. So underneath the covers, when we invoke Tableau or we invoke Power BI, we actually grab that data, and we're Spark based. So that data becomes data sets within Spark. And from there, you can do a wide variety of things. So these visuals, if we look at this visual, it's sum of geographic by total children. And here is what we created underneath the covers, and that's now a data set. Same is true for other ones, and this is what the data set looks like. So now it gives you a wide variety of things that you can test in terms of, hey, is the data the same? Is the data accurate? Are things missing? Are there duplicates? Are there things that are in the Tableau environment that aren't now in the Power BI environment, and so forth. We also do, this is the results of those tests. So we just compared 2 of the data sets, and we find here that there were a lot of mismatches. And in this particular case, the mismatches aren't really mismatches, but they are precision in the decibels. So you can do things to prevent that from coming out as a test result, and but do much more elaborate things, like I'd mentioned, only in A, only in B, duplications, and so on. We also do filter differences and create wizards. So our wizards will take, if you have hundreds or thousands of dashboards and reports that you want to compare between Tableau and Power BI, or between Power BI and Power BI. What we do is we have a wizard that will create those comparisons or those tests automatically. So instead of having to do it individually for each dashboard and report, you do that, you drag and drop the workbooks, and it creates the test cases for you. We also have the ability to do filtering differences. So a lot of times when you migrate or just test data analytics, Tableau or Power BI, one of the critical factors is to make sure that the filters are the same, the filters are behaving in the same fashion, and so on. We actually have automated means to create the combinations of filters and run multiple tests from one test based upon changing those filter parameters. We also do performance comparison. So as we run these tests, we also capture the run duration. So now you can tell that, hey, my Tableau and my Power BI reports ran in roughly the same amount of time. If there was a big discrepancy, obviously you'd want to look into that and potentially refine queries or do some kind of performance testing. Very soon, we will also have stress testing in the technology. And the stress testing will give you the ability to test if you're moving from, let's say, Tableau to Power BI. You can stress test Power BI to see if it can handle the workload that you had on Tableau. So another kind of test that we provide that would be important in any kind of consolidation or migration. Now, we're adding a lot of capabilities into the product with Gen AI, DataOps testing Copilot, and we think about these things in 4 different areas. The area that we're done the most so far is in the generation capability. So as we all know, Gen AI can create nice documents. You can ask it to give you a variety of, give me the top 5 issues with migrating to Tableau or Power BI, all those kinds of things. But it's also very good at creating data quality rules from the metadata. It gives you ETL transformations and such from mapping documents. It can create DAX queries, so it can generate all these things and make cumbersome tasks much easier in the testing environment. It also, as I mentioned a little bit, can give you insights. It can either explain code to you, or it can identify differences, in this case, between reports and explain the results. We're looking into it taking corrective action to auto-heal things, and then also that DataOps chat box to be able to converse and educate on a higher level. So those are many of the things that we're looking at with the Gen AI. Finally, in conclusion, this isn't for the faint of heart, right? So you have hundreds or thousands of different reports, and maybe in both platforms, and maybe you have 4 or 5 or 6 or more platforms. Well, you really have to weigh in the risk and reward. And the reward can be very high, but the risks need to be mitigated through assessments, through evaluating what you have, through talking to the users, through really understanding the lay of the land. What's the value in moving to one or the other? And are you doing this again in conjunction with moving to the cloud or moving to Microsoft Fabric or any of the other technologies that are out there? So we think the testing aspect of this, we can help reduce the cost and the time frame for doing the testing, but there's still a whole lot of things outside of that that need to be considered. So with that, let me stop here and turn this over to Shubhanshu.
Thanks a lot for that, Dave. Let me start sharing my screen.
Yes.
All right, so let's get started with the technical demonstration. We've had Dave explain the variety, needs, and use cases of what we'd like to cover. And now I'd like to showcase the product actually achieving those specific benchmarks and use cases. I'll try to add some business use cases as we speak so that we have a good parallel association with it. But in most systems and most of the test cases that I'll illustrate, we'll be sticking to the business use case, the reason why we have to do it, and of course, the scalability of the scale. Because one aspect that we have not discussed so far is, of course, the main aspect that, well, you don't have just a couple of reports that you have to migrate. It's migration of thousands of reports and maybe even hundreds and thousands of reports, depending on your use case. So now let's get started with the very first system, which is a Tableau to Power BI comparison validation. And here the focus is not on visuals. We are not there yet. Here the focus is on the data. So harkening back to the screenshots that Dave was alluding to earlier, the application is capable of connecting both to Tableau and Power BI. And within the application, you'll see we get an embedded report system present. And all the visuals, be it the variety of visuals in a tabular format, pie charts, bar charts, box charts, and other aspects, all of these visuals can be converted into Spark data frames within our application. Now, let's go on a small tangent here. The application is Apache Spark based, so it has a couple of capabilities which are not as a parent. Firstly, of course, since it's Apache Spark based, we're capable of handling a huge volume as well as a huge number of test cases. The reason for huge number being an important pointer will come in shortly. The second aspect is that the application can be installed directly onto your infrastructure itself. This could be on a bare metal on-premise server, or in this case, which is very accurate, could be on an Azure-based Databricks cluster system as well. We support AWS, we support Google Cloud, and a lot of other cloud providers within the system and subspace. And the main gist here is that because the application is installed behind your firewalls, you don't really have to worry about where exactly your reports are going. And mainly, you don't really have to worry about compliance from that perspective. Anyway, that's a small tangent towards the part of compliance and a bit of architecture. But going back to our use case, the application has successfully converted these particular visuals into their corresponding datasets. Note, these datasets and these numbers are not being pulled out from optical character recognition. As Dave has said earlier, we actually get into the corresponding BI system and pull these datasets and numbers as the BI system is creating them. So what this implies is that if you're applying filters or if you're applying a very specific row-level security or user group access, those changes and those effects are translated here as well. A quick pointer just to illustrate what I mean here as well. At this point, you see that I have all my corresponding numbers and datasets present in my embedded report. And if I go into visuals, I'll see the same aspect present right there. We have all the numbers, we have all the sales, everything is pretty fine. But if I go into my page and let's say I apply a basic filter right there, let's go for Arkansas, while the embedded report changes, we see the same changes reflect within the actual data association as well. And this is going to come in very handy when we discuss the other aspect of the application, which is validating the reports not just at a zoomed out level, but at a zoomed in filter or slicer per slicer basis as well. More on that later. For now, if we get back to our system and we see that, yes, for an overall perspective, we can pull these data sets out and we see that our application is capable of doing that. We have two sets of data sets. One comes from Tableau, one comes from Power BI. And now the main problem statement realize is that, well, we need to compare them. Now, within the comparison itself, there are a lot of problems that are going to come in, especially if you want to do it in a manual process. The first aspect is, well, these data set names, the corresponding column names associated with them, the column order, the number of columns within these data sets, and of course, the data types of these corresponding data sets are going to be inherently different. And if you plan to do this from a manual perspective, a single dashboard such as this with just one page and 4 visuals within them itself is going to take a substantial amount of time. Not to mention the aspect of filtration and slicers that's going to come in as we move ahead to other examples. So the application basically understands this problem statement of yours and using just drag and drop, as you can see, this has been done with drag and drop itself, maps what data sets should be mapped to the other using fuzzy logic. And within these data sets mapped, also maps the corresponding columns between them. Luckily, in this case, we're working with just simple use cases where we have bar graphs. So it's just 2 columns. Even in that case, the application understands that sum underscore sales and sum of sales should be mapped to one another. If we move to a tabular system where we have multiple columns present, in this case, you'll see out of the 7 columns in one system, we have mapped just 5 because these are the only ones that actually map against the other. In this particular use case, Tableau has introduced a couple of extra columns which don't really have their counterpart in Power BI. The application has automatically understood and removed them from the corresponding mapping. I do have a lot of control over what I would like to map manually as well. But from a scalability perspective, for most use cases, our application can do all of this automatically. And this reduces a lot of time at the end user who has to sit through all of this. From an end user perspective, using our product, they just have to define what exactly they would like to compare. Meaning all they have to do is work with what data sets they would like to run comparisons against, the mappings, the conversions, everything is done automatically. And then the application is going to tell you exactly where the mismatches lie. So here we see out of the 4 charts and 4 visuals that we were seeing, the regional visual is completely correct. We have a complete match there. Not really big of a concern there. But if you go to the other systems, let's open up category. We see that this is the screenshot that we were using in the charts earlier, where the problem statement isn't exactly that they are incorrect, it's just a precision issue. This might be important for you, and this might be a false positive as well. In case it's a false positive, the application does support a good amount of thresholding, where you can allow this particular set of values to be off by a percentage or by an actual numeric value as well. We have a lot of such features within the application that we keep within the user's reach, and we don't lock our users into specific use cases. To go into a bit more complexities, we'll see in sales overview. So if this was a tabular system that we're working with, we say that we have a lot of mismatches. And here we see that we have duplicates rolled in within the system. as well as systems set of records which are present only in one system and not the other. So the application has got differences between the tabular systems as well, in this case of multiple columns and multiple rows. The application is capable of handling millions of records, so a few thousand records within a system. And even if you're working with, say, 10K or a million records within your Tableau and Power BI system, since we are Apache Spark based, the application can easily handle that volume of records. Now that we have done this from an overall perspective, let's go back to our problem statement and discuss a bit more on the metadata. Of course, the main use case here being that if you're a Tableau or Power BI user, you're not going to look at the reports just at an overall level and call it a day. You're going to apply filters and slicers on top of them. Here, the example filter that I'm applying is on state. So here, the assumption is that me as an end user, I need to understand what the numbers look like for specific states. And since I get my numbers from, in this case, different vendors, that's the assumption, there's a good chance that at an overall level, the numbers might match. As we saw, that could be only a precision issue. But if we zoom in, say in this case for California, there could be much bigger problems because of the different vendors that come in and because of different implementations of slicers between Power BI and Tableau. Power BI has this set of slicers as well within its system. So now the problem statement shifts, it evolves. Now the problem statement is that, well, I have understood that my data sets are fine if I have not applied any filter, but what if I've applied the filter of California on both sides? In this case, let's go with Alabama for now. Then are the numbers still correct? Notice we don't have California right now, and this difference between the filters can also be caught, but that's a point for later. So, but before that, we get into this particular problem statement, which is ensuring that even after filtration and other aspects, the application should be able to compare them. So for that, I have created a duplicate example, except here, I have parameterized my state. So right now, we'll be starting with Alabama alphabetically, but what we need to do, and here the problem statement kind of shifts, that, well, I don't have just one filter. I have about 4 filters within my system, and all of them could have combinations. And if we really scale up the problem statement, I could have such combinations for multiple systems altogether, multiple dashboards. And so what we need is a way to ensure that the application understands that, hey, these are corresponding filters and slices, and then iteratively go through each and every process, each time applying a particular filter or a combination of filters, and then running the same validation again. The application is capable of doing that. It's a complete demo that we have within our BI DevOps, where the application understands what these filters are, what the corresponding values associated with them are, and then you can iteratively go through each and every one of them. For the sake of time, we'll be skipping that aspect and jumping to the results screen. But if you go into the run history of this particular system, we see that, yes, we have run this test case multiple times. And when we have run this multiple times, you'll see that we have put a different state each and every time. So in one case, we are in New York. In another case, we are in Virginia. And of course, in another case, we are in Wyoming altogether. So in this particular use case, we see that the application has gone in and understood exactly what we have to do, which is change filters routinely. And as you'll see, we are in the reporting section of our application. The application has actually applied those specific reports within the system as well. So as you can see, we are at Wyoming at this point, and we see that the data sets as well as the report itself has been updated to that point. Do note this, do understand that we are going to apply this from a visual perspective as well. So the parameterization option can be applied from a visual perspective. Now let's get into the other aspect, which is a visual perspective, as we discussed earlier. Say you have this exact problem statement, except now you need to ensure that, well, your data sets, so from in this case, your data sets are fine, but what about a visual system? So as you see on your screen, what we have done at this point is we have connected to Power BI, we have connected to Tableau, and we have basically dragged and dropped the reports associated with both of them. I'll be showcasing this aspect as well shortly. It's as easy as dragging and dropping the report between both the systems, between say Power BI and Tableau. These are just the same embedded reports that we have seen with the options of filters, might I add. And then in the results, the application has automatically done 2 sets of things. Firstly, the application has tried to find out any kind of textual difference between the same. Note that within sales overview, the order and the number of text that we see, say for sum of discount versus discount, sum of profit versus profit, sum of quantity versus quantity. These differences have been caught within the application as well. The same aspect with regards to the order of the text between west, east, center, south, and center, east, south, and west has also been caught by the application. So these are textual-based validations that the application is capable of. Now, there's, of course, the burning question. Well, these charts do look similar, but they are slightly different in terms of the positioning and other aspects. So the application is capable of running a visual-based comparison, which can do a pixel-to-pixel comparison within the system. But as you might imagine, since these are completely different reports, it's going to read out a good amount of the report for you. Because that's something that BI can actually run with. And here you see that the application is doing the same thing within our application as well. Now, what we are planning to do for this particular use case is, as Dave suggested earlier, is a generative AI prompt that's going to illustrate exactly what is incorrect within your system. We have this in our beta version, and what it basically illustrates is that, well, all the charts within the application are in sync. The color combination between the charts is not in sync. The application also gives out the exact difference between the color legends, and of course the positioning and order. The positioning is in sync, so the application calls that out, and it also calls out that the order of the columns or the order of the actual priority between, say, region chart, where we have west at start, and in the other case we have center at start. The AI generated summary can actually capture these as well. So a lot of strides being made here, and right now the application is already capable of capturing any kind of visual differences between the same. All of this has a great amount of customizability that we're skipping over in the interest of time. But rest be assured, you can also define exclusion zones. You can also define the same parameterization that we have done earlier, and much more. The other aspect that we had discussed and that we had alluded to at the start is, well, we need to ensure that our filters are valid as well. And so the application is capable of actually capturing the filters between both Tableau and Power BI and ensuring that the same set of filters are passing through between both the systems. Here we see that everything is matching pretty perfectly within the application. And so there are no differences found within our system. And so that's what we see within our application as well. If I go to another version of this particular test case, the application has tried to capture that. And we see that, well, all the filters which had been defined are in the operator all state, and everything is as expected within our application. In fact, if you're working with a few complex reports, the application is capable of understanding those and comparing them within the system as well. And that's just not it. The application is also capable of understanding action links, hierarchy, and drill down. Because if you are an advocate user of any BI tool, you understand that action links, hierarchy, and drill down, these are the places where reports really shine, because you're going to have a really complex report. And as an end user, you want to drill down into a specific point, specific reference point, and then run validations from there. And you need to run validations as your end user is going to use those specific drill downs and the corresponding action links. So the application does support that using bookmark systems and other aspects. And I just wanted to give it a quick shout out in the limited amount of time that we have. But similar to filters, we do have bookmark support within the application. As you can see, we can capture bookmarks and run them accordingly as well. Additionally, the one other aspect that I quickly want to cover up is the fact of performance. Now, of course, Dave has definitely spoken about this in his deck, but the main gist here is that we need to ensure that the loading times between our reports are valid. So here we get a quick peek on what's happening in the backend. We're actually trying to access the corresponding server, and then we are noting the times it takes to actually apply this corresponding set of filters if we are applying those, and then how long does it take for the report to be loaded at that state and back to the user. So here we see that between Power BI and Tableau, there is a small difference between the systems. As we can see, if I go back to results, we see there's a bit of 4-second difference between Power BI and Tableau. And so if needed, we can actually raise flags implying that if, say, the corresponding Tableau report was taking 24 seconds, that's about a 100% increase, the application can raise that out as a flag as well, notifying the end user that, well, this particular report is taking much longer than expected, so we should probably look into it. Now that we have covered all of these other aspects from a report-to-report basis, let's discuss how we actually implode this from a dashboard perspective. Now, a dashboard here is under the assumption that, well, it's not just a single page that you have to work with, it's multiple reports. As I discussed, about 50 reports, maybe hundreds of pages and so on. Our application is used by one of the biggest users of Tableau, and they have about 50K workbooks within their system. So scale is something that we have always dealt with within our application. And we understand that automation on this perspective is very important. And for this, within the application itself, we have wizards that help you ease the process. Let's create a very simple regression test case just to illustrate what we mean. So here I'll pick up the Power BI regression and we'll connect it to Tableau on the backend itself. And now, just to illustrate how easy this particular drag and drop is, and to just not mince words, but it's as easy as dragging and dropping the entire set of pages and reports you would like to work with. The application is automatically going to then understand a set of filters, and if you would like to define them dynamically, the application does all of those as well. And of course, if you have some additional options, if you want to edit these test cases further, you have complete free reign on doing that as well. Now, I've already done this previously, and I've created a lot more test cases within my application. So let's go to that once in BI bulk. And you'll see that within the subfolder, I've created the entire dashboard words of test cases across multiple reports. There are a couple of pages of these, and each of them have multiple pages and components. I can edit them personally if I have to get into specifics for a specific, say, a critical or crucial dashboard or report if I would like to. But from an end user perspective, I have done 90% of the work. The only thing left is running them all together. And for that, we have pipelines. In pipelines, while I can choose to open up a pipeline in this particular use case where I can choose conditional clauses, run certain test cases before the other, run a test case only if the other ones have failed, and so on and so forth. In this case, what I have done is much simpler. I've just run all the test cases in parallel, taking advantage of the Apache Spark architecture so that I can run a lot of things in parallel. Note, we have the iteration node right here. So if I want to run this particular test case iteratively while defining multiple user groups, implying that if I want to run the validation while impersonating different user groups or different set of filter parameters, I can use the iteration node for that. And now that I've done this particular dashboard validation, let's see what the application gives out. The application has created a report for me. And within the report, the application is giving me a proper engagement as to what exactly has fallen. Sorry, what exactly has failed specifically within the test case. Of course, the parameters and other aspects are present right here. So as an end user, all I have to do is find out, okay, out of the 20 reports, 3 have failed. Let's take a look at why this particular report has failed. And the application is going to tell me exactly what report this is. So I get a nice snapshot of the actual report as well. We get a comparison of what was between the two corresponding data sets, in this case, Power BI and Tableau. So I see, okay, there's a decent level mismatch, and I get to see exactly what the mismatch is. I had defined a threshold of 0.1% plus or minus, but there are values which are beyond that. So the application is calling out between me. And then the application is also running a cross environment test for my system. So this is between my two. This can be between QA and prod, but in this example, this is between Power BI and Tableau. So the application is also capturing the fact that there's a filter which is entirely missing between my Tableau and Power BI. And so the application is notifying me from that perspective. Additionally, within this application, you can also correspondingly raise Jira tickets, raise ServiceNow tickets, send out Slack notifications, and of course, save the corresponding incorrect records as data sets, as files, and a lot more. There's an entire aspect of integration with CI/CD tools, DevOps tools, and other aspects, which the application inherently supports. Finally, just as I mentioned, I would like to give a quick shout out to the stress test, which is in the application. And what the stress test does is it's capable of impersonating multiple users to simulate load on your Power BI and your Tableau servers to ensure that the corresponding server is capable of handling that many users accessing a bunch of reports at a particular time. We give out an entire dashboard worth of reports as well on the corresponding stress load so that you have a good understanding of which reports are causing lag, which reports are beyond your SLA loading times, and which reports are straight up denying access because of overload or because of login issues. We have a lot of specifics there, but for the sake of time, we'll be skipping that. Finally, an honorable mention to a few sets of features that we could not cover in today's use case. First is the fact that we have direct Azure DevOps integration. I understand that if you're migrating to Power BI, Azure and Microsoft Shop might come with it. So if you're an advanced user of Microsoft DevOps in terms of pipelines, Git, test plans, the application has direct bidirectional connectivity with both of them, sorry, all three of them. So you can easily define your pipelines within the application and run them either through ours or through the DevOps pipeline itself. And the same is true for test plans. So it's a very healthy way for you to define your CI/CD pipelines, define the test plans from a QA perspective, and run them accordingly. And the same is true with our Git integration. So it's not just Azure Git. We have a lot of different types of Git integrations. But since we define our test cases as code, if you're looking for true version control, true CI/CD, the application can support that inherently as well. With that, I would like to actually pause and stop at this point, as we have covered a lot of specific material. And I'd really like to thank everyone for their time so far. And at this point, if there are any other questions, feel free to write them out in the chat so that we can have a quick discussion on them, if there are any.
Shubhanshu, we have a couple of questions. So for one of the question, Dave has already answered that which tool did you use for Tableau report automation testing? It's BI Validator. Then we have which automated testing tools do you recommend for Tableau report with data source Teradata?
Well, I would like to happily say that yes, BI Validator does that as well. With a quick example, I can illustrate that what you're seeing right now is just one type of example between two BI sources. But let me get into my Tableau folder, and you will see that the application has connectivity with Teradata, SQL Server, flat files, Excel files, and everything in between. So let's open up a couple of Tableau examples to illustrate this further. So it's very similar to what we saw in our system, except here, instead of a Power BI report, we are connecting to our source data. In this example, we have Excel files, and the other example, we have a SQL Server. So let me quickly Open that up. And the base principle is the same, with the main difference being that if you're connecting to a database, in this case, of course, this could be a Teradata SQL as well. As you can see, our application is agnostic at the end of the day. But as you can see, you can define your aggregation here. You can define your aggregation using Python, using Scala and other systems. And that's the main difference between the two test cases. Since you're working with a database, you can't just validate, compare 50K records against an aggregate. So there's an additional step of creating the aggregation, but the application does have direct support to not just Teradata. Let me use this time to illustrate the variety of sources that the application does support. So if you're looking for any kind of validation post your migration as well between your source and between your BI tool of choice, the application supports all of these and much more using CData, generic connectors, as well as API. We have a dedicated series of webinars that we have done along these lines, and we're more than happy to have a dedicated demo, basically going into that specific source and the combination with the BI tool. So we're more than happy to have that corresponding demo session, as that's a use case of ours, which really goes into production monitoring as well. The next question then.
Yeah, in this screenshot, did you change the subcategory in the report B? It's the initial of your demo when you were.
I believe this was with regards to the very first one when we were discussing parameters. Yes, it was on both sides as well. Let me quickly close this additional windows for the sake of clarity, and let's go to that specific use case itself. So yes, if I get into the filters, you will see that within my Power BI system, well, while I can manually choose the corresponding filter right here on the right side. So while I can manually choose the corresponding filters right here, and that's Alabama, the reason it's Alabama inherently is that within the filter section, if I go into the page filters, you will see that I have all the filters present right here. And here, I have parameterized my filter system to the parameter that I had defined earlier. I've done the exact same thing within my Tableau system as well. So if I go into Tableau, let's open up this report right here. And again, since we don't have the direct combination in terms of page level filters, we have filters present within this section right there. It's slightly different. But within this, what I can do, and I've done this previously, is like just parameterize them. And here, just apply that corresponding parameter right there. Of course, I had done this in my previous system, and hence that's why in the parameters we see the same system coming. But this is how I've applied those parameters. So yes, we have done it for both in system A and system B. Did we change the subcategory in report B? No, we did not change the subcategory. We were only working with state at this point. But if you would like to, as you can see, we can change the subcategory if needed. Here, the data sets are interdependent. So here, if I move to the corresponding state, so say in this case, I remove a particular state, those other filters can also be affected, and the application is capable of working with those interdependencies between filters and slicers as well. I hope that answers the question. If not, we're more than happy to deep dive into it either now or in a proper demo where we can have a back and forth on this.
Another question that says that can the tool handle a growing number of tests and users, and is there any limit to it?
That's a very interesting question, and the answer is in short yes. And the reason I say in short yes, because the longer answer implies that we need to understand what exact volume of reports and test cases you're working with. So there's a twofold answer here. Firstly, once again, the application is Apache Spark based, so we are horizontally scalable. So if you're working with a really huge test case, or similar to what we have seen earlier, so we have a client who has come in with about, say, 5K reports that they have to migrate. 5K reports, that's a huge number. And if they would like to run those validations at a day in, day out basis, they would naturally require a decent amount of infrastructure, or they would like to require a good amount of time association with each type of migration test case. So there is no theoretical limit that we have. In fact, the reason this comes in pretty as an important pointer is that, if you add that corresponding question with the aspect of multiple filters. So what you see on your screen is about 50K, sorry, not 50K, 50 states. And so the validation here is happening for each and every state, and these permutation and combinations can get up to thousands pretty easily. And so we have actually done a lot of backend processing and stress testing of our application there. We're capable of running a lot of test cases in parallel, as you just saw. And so in most cases, yes, we can handle a huge amount of test cases within the application as well. I mean, 50K reports for one of our plans is also one of those case studies that we have done. And so, yes, but I would definitely like to run the caveat that there's a good amount of dependency on the complexity of the report, the exact type of validation you would like to run with those complexities, and of course, the sheer number of reports as well. There is no theoretical limit that the application works with, but there should be some practical limits where you really don't want to run 10,000 combinations of a report in some cases, and sometimes you'd rather run just combinations and be fine. So there's a lot of nuance in that discussion, but the short answer is yes, we definitely support a growing number of reports, and as you can see, 50K reports and recently 5K with this exact use case of migration from Tableau to Power BI.
So I think these are the all questions that were being asked. So, okay, so thanks, Dave, for a clear understanding of how BI Validator could be used for Tableau to Power BI migration projects, and Shubhanshu for an extensive demo for the same. So, if I have also shared in chat the DataOps suite free trial link, if anyone is looking for it, and if you have any specific set of use cases to look at, our team can help you with a personal demo. You just have to drop a note at contact@datagaps.com. So, thanks everyone.
Thank you, Pooja. Thank you, Shubhanshu. And more importantly, thank everybody for attending. We greatly appreciate that. You'll find that we're a collaborative, low pressure organization, really interested in creating value for your organization. And so if you want to do a little bit deeper dive into things through discovery calls, through demonstrations, we often provide POC capability as well, but we're more than happy to have those conversations. Just reach out to us and we will get back to you quickly. So thank you, everybody, and have a good rest of your day.